bad book, and no matter how good the grammar is, the book will never be good. So I took it on myself to write about my life during the war, and in 2 months' time, I completed the manuscript of about 300 pages that I did on a Olivetti typewriter, Olivetti 22.
And that was your first published book?
No.
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 What happened?
I put it on the shelf, and I forgot all about it. I discovered it last year when I was doing work on the Amalfi book, and I discovered this manuscript. I said, oh my God, I looked at it. I immediately gave it to my wife, Margaret, who read it. She liked it, and we decided to publish it. And so I published the first and the last book at the same time.
The first and the last book, right? Yeah, right. In fact, the first book is published last so far.
Right.
The latest.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the subject of this interview.
Yes.
Now, and it is called, I don't know if somebody could check it out. It's Boy Destined to America.
Boy Destined to America.
Now, since you did not publish then, I imagine your English, your vocabulary wasn't as it would be today.
Right.
And I noticed that there are some misspellings, some punctuation needs, but you published anyway. Why did you do that?
I published because I thought the book was authentic. It told a real story about this young boy and his family. What happened to us during the war?
So in other words, if you think if you had edited, that it would change the story, right?
Probably.
Yeah.
But I wanted to keep it the way that it was.
You know, I read it and I found it riveting. At times, I even forgot that I was reading. I was so anxious or interested in reading inside the story that, and all of a sudden I said, what am I doing? I was really in the story. Probably because I also was part of the history of war in Italy and the invasion. But even the family problems and vicissitudes, it was really riveting, and I think it's a good book.
Strangely enough, I had completely forgotten about it. When I started reading it, I couldn't believe that I had written it.
So nobody edited it?
No, Margaret edited, but only lightly.
Lightly.
Yeah.
It's in the third person. Why did you decide third person? You are talking about yourself, I imagine, right?
Right.
But it's a real story.
Yes, because according to Professor Holmes, he suggested that even though you write about yourself, you can do it in the form of a book, of a novel.
So you read this as a novel?
You're not supposed to, because it's all true.
It's all true.
All true. Everything. Everything.
So in other words, and the peculiar thing is that, you know, you can memoir of a specific time.
Yes.
It ends when you arrive to the U.S.
It ends when my mother and I boarded the ship Vulcania in New York. We almost didn't make it because there were some mistakes with the passports. And that's where it ends. So here I am on the ship looking back, and I have to admit, and I'm not proud of this moment, I was angry at Italy. And I turned west, and I'm going to America. And when we landed in New York and saw the Statue of Liberty and all the cars running down the streets on the side, all these little cars running fast and all the same, I said to myself, this must be a land of opportunity and a great land.
But obviously, you have to be honest also that and say, you came from a rural area.
Absolutely.
In fact, it was rural. You were farmers. And all of a sudden, you landed in New York City.
I know. I know. It's just amazing.
It was. In other words, it's in itself the fact that from rural, even today, if somebody comes from a farm, lands in New York City, he opens up.
That's why I said at that moment I'm not proud of myself, but I have to tell that that's how I felt.
I see.
But remember that where we lived and how we lived, we had no running water, we had no bathrooms, we had no electricity. I never read a newspaper.
I don't know if you know Robert Viscusi said that people, the immigrants that came here, they actually lived like in the Middle Ages, and all of a sudden landing in New York is like landing on the 20th century. So
unbelievable.
it's unbelievable the change that one has to go through.
And as I look back to my life, I cannot believe it.
Tell me, you landed in New York City and you met for the first time your father?
I met my father for the first time.
You had never seen him before?
I'd never seen him. No, he left when I was, I think, 8 or 9 months old. And I never saw him. And it was really different. This man, I know we hugged and all, but well, there was nothing to say because I didn't know him. But my brother, Chris, came to pick us up.
Now, your brother has its own story. You're talking about Chris, right?
Oh, Chris.
He was in the American Army.
He was at the Battle of the Bulge. He almost got killed there.
In Battle of the Bulge. And then when he was given the okay...
So after the Battle of the Bulge, the war ended. And the American soldiers were all being transported back. But because there were too many of them, they had to wait. So my brother was given a leave of absence and says, "What do you want to do?" He says, "I want to go visit my mother." So my brother, all of a sudden, one evening, there was turmoil on the street. And I said, "Who?" And I was told that my brother had arrived and that he was inside the house. Oh, even now, I'm full of emotion about that.
Yeah, of course.
So I saw him for the first time in Italy, and it was the most joyful time.
Your father, you know, even though it's your story, but it's not peculiarly, uniquely to your story. There are other people who also had never met their father until, for example, we have the Italian-American poet laureate, Joseph Tusiani. I don't know if you know him. He was 22. He had never met his father.
Right.
So
and it makes sense if you know a little bit of the history. And the history is this, that the male from the poverty part of southern Italy had to leave. And so the male always went forward, back and forth. But he never stayed in America solidly. Like my grandfather was the first to come, but then he went back and forth. My father did the same thing. He would go to Italy, get my mother pregnant,
and then go back to work.
Then went back. Then went back again, made other children, and then went back. And then as he went back and forth, he first took my brother to America, then he took my sisters, and then he was going to take my mother, my other sister, and I. But the war broke, and so we didn't come. But that was the regular things that was going on.
Many lives were interrupted, obviously.
Absolutely.
Okay, now we want to come to the book itself, because so far we have been talking about you, but we will want to talk a little about this.
Sure.
First of all, the title. The title, Something Strange, Boy Destined to America. The two things together, boy and destined to America, somehow the English, people would have said it differently. But because now we know the background, probably we explain. But why destined also? Destined has a determinism, a kind of life.
I know, I was destined.
Fatalistic.
I was destined for this reason. There were 6 children in my family, and I was the only one that was born an American citizen, because my father, before I was born, had become a citizen. All that time, he was an Italian citizen. So all my sisters and brothers were Italian citizens, except for me.
So you had to come.
So I was destined for some reason, and I cannot explain it other than that.
So you knew that one day destiny would be accomplished.
Yes.
I see. That's why.
Yeah.
That's why. What is the story about? Briefly, try to tell us what is the gist of.
The story is about me, this young boy.
Even now, the people who read the story actually read it in the third person, meaning they
Third
see
person.
you as a boy
Sure.
going around.
But it is about me as a boy from before the war to the end of the war. And all the things that happened on battles, all kinds of things, but also all the things that happened within my family. Everyone is described of my family, my uncles, my aunts, my two grandfathers, Crescenzo, who was not ambulatory, he couldn't walk, and Gabriele, who was my mother's father, and he was my idol in every way. And so the relationships of all these people, property, the value of property, precedence in many ways. Why was one supposedly better treated than others?
Talk about the inheritance, the division.
Everything.
That's
And
a very
so-
human story.
And so it is very complicated, but very true to what actually happened. Human interest, love, hate, everything, murder, all of those things.
I think my point of view here,
Yes.
what I read is basically the whole story. What it becomes interesting is the fact that it is divided on a moral basis.
Yes.
The good people and the bad people, and the interaction between these two people,
Yes.
these two kind of people.
Yes.
Now, according to you yourself, telling that you are one of the good person because you are positive,
Yes.
and therefore you see the good of everyone.
I'm optimistic.
You're optimistic.
And I believe in people. I believe that people are good until they prove themselves otherwise. If they prove themselves otherwise, I'm not a friend.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're good, I'm a friend, more than a friend.
The one person that is evil, in a sense, in the book, is your father. Even
Yes.
though we never see your father. In fact, your father dominates the whole story here,
Yes.
from the very beginning
Yes.
until the very end when you meet with him.
Yes, he was not evil, but he was not a nurturing father. He never took care of his children. He abused the children. He never abused me because I was not there, but he abused not, by the way, not sexually or anything, abused in the sense of not taking care of us. My brother and my sisters and my mother, none of them have had anything positive to say about him, ever. And I knew that from the very beginning because my mother used to tell me, and she used to say, I have to say this, don't be like your father. And none of us took after my father.
But there is a place where we read his letter. He writes a letter just before you
Yes.
leave. He writes a letter to Alberto, I believe, the son-in-law.
Yes.
And he says, let me see if I can find it. He says, I am what I am. I act according to nature.
Yeah.
He explains very clearly.
Yes,
And you begin to see that there are two sides from the same story.
Of course,
you know?
of course.
It says, I simply do not like people who act weak when they encounter a crisis.
Yeah.
So he's got no patience
Yeah.
for other people that act in a way that
Yes.
do not act personality. But there is also another weakness in the father, is that he drinks a lot.
He was a drunkard in many ways.
He was a drunkard. But did he work? Was he
He worked
responsible?
very little. He could have really worked and earned money.
But he used his own children to survive. sometimes.
Right, right.
And that's a fact.
Yes. He was a very lucky man to have had the children that he had because we took care of him. When he was sick and he couldn't afford anything, the children came up and took care of him.
There is one passage which I don't know that I have it, but the person who says that there are evil, and the evil person with drinking, it is the drinking that brings out the evil of the person. If he's a good person and he drinks, nothing really happens. Maybe an incident or so, but it doesn't happen. When a person is evil inside, then drinking, it becomes, it brings the animal in him.
Of course. But proof of that are the stories that my brothers and sisters and mother used to tell me, that after he was drinking, he was no good.
No good.
He lost it. I mean, just an anecdote on this drinking. This is amazing. When my mother had Gilda, my sister, who is going to be 98 in September, my father was so angry that he slapped my mother because she had a girl.
Oh,
okay.
wow.
When I was born and I was a boy, he drank because he was so happy that I was a boy. Can you imagine?
But that's a traditional,
Yes, of
you
course,
can accuse it, but it's also part of the,
Yeah.
I don't know, men like to have a son rather than a daughter, which is ridiculous, but, boys without girls.
Of course.
Going back a little to the war, what is the direct experiences that you had? At one point, do you even say that airplanes went over your house?
Yes. We lived on a highway that connected the East Coast to the West Coast, Naples to Foggia. And I was born in a almost dead center between the two coasts. And the highway was a connecting highway, so that when Germany invaded Italy to go to Africa, they used that road to go to Salerno and Naples. And when they were defeated, they used the same road to retreat.
I see.
So I was there seeing everything that happened, both going towards Naples and then coming back from Naples.
Is that the old Appian Way or no?
No, the Appian Way stops.
Which passes by there, I imagine.
Yes, nearby.
Nearby.
Yeah, this is a new highway.
Which is a Roman road.
A Roman road.
Still being used.
Absolutely, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I saw the whole war as a boy, almost always by myself. And I would sit in front of my house. There was a big stone. I would sit in it, and there I would see all the German trucks going by, going left.
Okay.
And I remember I analyzed all of these people. And what I noticed and remember
Were you
so
able
vividly,
to talk to them?
No. I never spoke with any German soldiers. They were always by themselves, never engaged us in any way or another. I thought that they were automatons. I mean, could they all be human beings? No, not at all. Not at all.
Now, I think we have to set the area here. Your area is very close to Mount Cassino, where the Germans and the American really...
Major battle.
Major battle, right?
And we couldn't take Cassino down. And it stood several months. So
the soldiers were in your area?
The soldiers who fought there in groups. They would be there either a month or whatever it is. After their tour of duty there, they were sent back for rest and recreation in my village. So I met the soldiers that fought in Mount Cassino, and I was able to tell, like the first group would come, and I made friends with especially soldiers from Morocco, and I used to know them by name. Then they would be shipped out.
This is when the Americans now are coming up
right.
from
This
south
is now
to north.
Monte Cassino, the actual battle.
I see.
So the war was going on.